My name's Diane Whitmore, and I paid for nearly everything at my son's wedding, from the snowy mountain venue in Colorado to the string quartet playing Coldplay covers. But still they wouldn't even let me through the gate. I stood there dressed in heels holding a gift I had wrapped with my own hands, only to hear my future daughter-in-law say, "Sorry, you're not on the list." And my son, my one and only child, just looked away like I was a stranger. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I turned around, walked back to my car and drove home. By the end of that same week I made a few calls and suddenly, every vendor had hit pause on their contracts. And that, honey, was just the beginning. I've never been the type to chase the spotlight. I never once tried to make my boys' big moments about me. All I ever wanted was to give Tyler the kind of life I never had. One with choices, pride, and solid ground to stand on. So when he said he was getting married, I didn't hesitate for a second. He didn't even ask for money. I offered quietly like any mother would. It all started one afternoon in my kitchen. Tyler stopped by with his fiancée Hannah, and they brought this big binder full of magazine clippings and Pinterest dreams. They wanted a wedding in Colorado with a snowy mountain backdrop, floral arrangements from floor to ceiling, and a live band doing acoustic covers. It was extravagant, sure, but beautiful, and I didn't want to dim their joy. "Mom, this is a big lift," Tyler said as he flipped through the pages. "We've got a few things covered from Hannah's side, but if you could help with some of the deposits." He didn't finish. I just smiled and said, "Of course. You two should be enjoying this, not stressing over money." He smiled and gave my hand a squeeze across the table. Hannah barely looked up, just smiled a little and went right back to texting. I figured she was just shy. That week I wired $12,000 to the event planner. Then another $6,500 to lock in the venue. Over the next couple months I paid for the photographer, the catering deposit, and the musicians. In the end I'd spent just over $42,000. And I kept a spreadsheet, not because I expected anything in return, but old habits are hard to break after 31 years as an accountant. I never once asked for credit. My name wasn't on the invitations, not on the guest list, not even on the seating chart. I assumed I didn't need to be. I was the groom's mother, for heaven's sake. But slowly things began to shift. At first it was little things. The rehearsal dinner got moved to her parents' country club. The color scheme changed to match her mother's jewelry. Then the officiant was swapped out for a colleague from her father's law firm. Everything started echoing her family's tastes. And Tyler, sweet but spineless, just nodded along. So I kept my mouth shut. I told myself, this is what letting go looks like. This is what good mothers do. They don't push. They trust. 2 weeks before the wedding I got an email from the planner. A small outstanding balance of $182. Per the contract it needed my signature. I jotted it down to handle the following Monday. But that Friday I called Tyler. "Hey honey, should I bring anything for the welcome brunch? I was thinking of baking my lemon lavender cookies." Silence. Then a small cough. Actually Mom, there's been a small change. The brunch is just for the bridal party and the family staying at the estate." "Family?" I asked. "Yeah, like Hannah's immediate family and, folks at the lodge. But don't worry, you'll see us plenty at the reception." That was the first real crack. Not because I was left out of brunch, but because I started to realize they didn't see me as family anymore. So I brushed it off. I went out and bought a dress. I wrapped a gift. A delicate handkerchief embroidered with their initials, just like the ones my late husband used to carry in his suit pocket. I even called the florist to ask if they could include a small bouquet from my home garden in the arrangements. They were kind and said they'd try to work it into the back table decor. The night before the wedding I barely slept. I ironed my dress twice. I curled my hair even though my hands tremble when I hold anything hot for too long. When I looked in the mirror I saw my mother's face staring back at me, strong, proud, and full of hope. I whispered to myself, tomorrow's going to be beautiful. It has to be. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because the next day I found myself standing outside an iron gate, being told I wasn't on the list, and my own son stood there without saying a word in my defense. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just turned and left. But in that quiet walk back to my car I made a promise to myself. I would write a new ending to this so-called celebration. Now that I look back I know this story isn't just mine. It's for every mother who gave her heart and her savings, only to be erased like she was never part of the picture. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cause a scene. I just went home, and I began. The morning air in Colorado was sharp, cold in that sparkling kind of way, where the sunlight bounces off the snowbanks like crushed diamonds. I showed up earlier than the official start time, not out of nerves just because I hate feeling rushed. I'd driven the whole 4 hours from Fairview by myself, no radio, no podcasts, just the soft hum of tires on pavement and a steady stream of quiet memories rising and fading like gentle hills. I wore a navy blue dress I had altered for the day, simple but elegant. It even matched the ribbon on the gift box I carried carefully in both hands. The estate was enormous. Iron gates trimmed with gold stood tall, the kind that only opened if you were expected. I parked near the guest entrance and walked up with purpose. I wasn't just a guest, I was Tyler's mother and I came to see my son get married. A young woman stood at the gate with a clipboard in one hand and a headset tucked behind her ear. She had a walkie clipped to her belt. I smiled and gave her my name. Diane Whitmore. She scanned the list then glanced up at me clearly unsure. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see you listed. That can't be right, I replied, doing my best not to sound offended. I'm the groom's mother. She tilted her head and pressed her earpiece. Hold on one moment. She murmured into her mic then paused, listening. When she finally looked at me again, her expression had stiffened. Could you please wait right here? So I stood. For what felt like 10 full minutes. And then they came, Hannah and Tyler. She wore a silky robe, her hair and makeup already done to perfection, flanked by 2 bridesmaids who moved like they were part of her shadow. She looked stunning, no doubt, but her face held no smile. She stepped forward like a woman about to confront a caterer who brought the wrong dessert. Diane, she said. Her voice was smooth, controlled, but dry. This is a bit of a surprise. I looked to Tyler. He stood behind her, not hiding exactly but definitely not stepping up either. I just thought I'd come a little early, I said, keeping my tone soft. Wanted to give you this before things got too busy. I held out the gift box. She didn't take it. We actually weren't expecting you today, Hannah said, folding her arms. There must have been a mix-up with the guest list. I didn't think I needed an official invite, I replied gently. I mean, Tyler's my son. That's when Tyler finally spoke. Mom, it's not really a good time right now. Things are kinda hectic. Maybe we can talk later. Just like that. Maybe. Standing there, brushed aside in front of the planner, the bridesmaids and whoever else was watching but pretending not to, I blinked. Once then twice. My throat tightened but I kept my voice steady. I lowered the gift box to the stone path beside me and gave a slow nod. I understand, I said even though I didn't. And I turned and walked away without looking back. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of people who saw me as some awkward mistake instead of family. I've always believed in keeping your dignity, especially when others try their hardest to strip it from you. That walk back to my car, it felt longer than labor. And I want to pause here and ask, have you ever felt that shift? That moment when the child you raised, the one you gave everything to, looks at you like you're optional? Like your place in their life is conditional? Yeah, I see you. You're not crazy, you're not invisible, and you sure as hell didn't deserve it. I drove away from that grand estate with sunlight dancing off my windshield and one thought running through my mind. They didn't just uninvite me. They erased me. Like I was never a mother, just a bank account in heels. When I got home I didn't even change. I sat right there at my kitchen table still wearing my dress, my shoes. The silence in the house was so deep it rang in my ears. I looked at my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Just one picture posted by the estate's official Instagram account. There was Hannah, glowing under an archway of orchids. My flowers. My money. No sign of Tyler's side of the family. No sign of me. I stared at that photo for a long minute. Then I whispered to myself, so this is how it ends. But in that thick silence something shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something steadier. Heavier. It was clarity. That night I pulled out my planner. Turned back to the wedding contracts. Pulled up the spreadsheet I'd printed weeks ago. Saw all the pending balances, the vendor notes, the items still awaiting my initials. And right then, everything changed. They didn't know it yet, but they'd built their dream day on a foundation I still owned. And I was still holding the keys. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed in my navy dress, the fabric wrinkled where I'd curled up on top of the blanket. The house was silent except for the kitchen fridge humming and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. My mind wouldn't let go of Tyler's face. The way he just stood there. Letting Hannah speak for both of them. Letting me stand there like I didn't belong. By morning, Fairview felt warmer than Colorado. No snow here yet. The same quiet streets, the same red mailboxes with little flags up, old men walking their dogs under the soft morning sun. It felt like a different world compared to that cold, glossy estate that spit me out. Before breakfast, I wandered out to the garden. My lavender bushes were still holding on even this late in the year. The scent was faint, more memory than fragrance, but it grounded me. I snipped a few stems and placed them in the small vase that once sat on Henry's nightstand. I thought about him more in moments like this. Quiet moments. Private decisions. Steady love that never needed to be seen to be real. I made one slice of toast, poured myself a cup of tea and sat back at the kitchen table. Then I opened the old photo album from the drawer under the phone. Not digital. Not organized. Just thick paper pages and plastic sleeves. First page. Tyler as a baby in his bassinet, squinting at the sky in our backyard. Then Halloween costumes I sewed by hand, science fair trophies, the car we co-signed, his college graduation. Each photo felt heavier than the last. I wasn't trying to feel sorry for myself. I wasn't looking for comfort. I just needed to remember that I had been there, through it all, and that I mattered. Because when someone you love tries to rewrite the story without you, it makes you question if you were ever really part of it. I reached into the pocket at the back of the album and pulled out the folded tuition statement from his last semester at State University. The one he couldn't cover. I wrote a check without thinking. "You can pay me back once you land a good job," I'd said. He never did. And I never asked. Kept going. Found the receipt from the closing costs on his first condo. The certificate of deposit I cashed out early when he needed to get out of that mess with his old business partner. All those little financial bruises I absorbed without ever calling them in. Because that's what mothers do. Right? We take the hit. We say we don't keep score. But that morning, sitting alone in the stillness of my kitchen, I saw something I hadn't wanted to face. They had. Tyler and Hannah had kept score. Maybe not with dollars but with control, image, power. Somewhere along the way they decided I didn't belong in their picture. That I didn't match the look they were going for. That my presence might dull the shine. And worse. Tyler went along with it. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was intentional. I hadn't simply been left out, I had been erased. My name, my role, my sacrifices, scrubbed out like pencil marks. And strangely I wasn't sad. I sat there in complete stillness, like a lake seconds before it freezes over. That deep quiet that isn't empty, it's full of something about to move. I got up, walked into my home office and turned on the lamp. In the drawer was a manila folder labeled Wedding, Tyler and Hannah. Inside, contracts, emails, planner notes, spreadsheets marked with green and red highlights. Every payment I'd made was there. Everyone had my name listed as the financial authorizer. I flipped to the final page of the estate agreement, the one with the clause in plain black ink. Final payment shall only be released upon written approval by Diane Whitmore. Back when I signed that, I didn't think it would matter. I was just protecting myself like I always did. Not because I thought my son would ever shut me out, but he had. And now I had a choice. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But out of something firmer. Something called principle. For the first time I saw the truth. Not just about Tyler but about myself. I had been quiet for too long. I had mistaken silence for love and being overlooked for grace. And worst of all, I had confused their comfort with my belonging. Standing there in my office, I whispered out loud, "No more." This wasn't going to be a meltdown. There would be no scenes, no shouting, no court threats. Just clean, quiet precision. Because when you've given everything and they act like you're nothing, the most powerful thing you can do is simply take yourself away. I didn't call Tyler. I didn't message Hannah. I didn't reach out to the planner. That would have made this about them. And this time it wasn't. This was for me. That afternoon, I poured a glass of iced tea and sat at the desk like I had so many times back in the 90s, balancing year-end books for small-town businesses. Calm. Focused. No wasted motion. The contract with Belmont Estate had been printed in tidy 12-point serif, with straight margins and no fluff. I remembered Section 8 exactly. Final payment requires approval from the original financer, Diane Whitmore. And guess what? No one had gotten my signature. There was still nearly $18,200 hanging out there, unpaid. The wedding may have come and gone, but the estate hadn't been fully compensated. Neither had the caterer, nor the band, nor that expensive drone videographer Tyler insisted would make the wedding feel like a Netflix special. They'd all been waiting on me. And I wasn't waiting on anyone anymore. I opened my email and began sending brief, polite notes to each vendor, attaching their contracts where my name was clearly listed as the financial contact. Each message ended the same way. Please consider all pending transactions frozen until further notice. Payment authorization is not granted at this time. Diane Whitmore. Replies started rolling in quickly. Understood. Please advise on next steps. We'll pause all billing per your direction. Thank you for the clarification, Ms. Whitmore. It wasn't loud. It wasn't public. But it was real, something I had control over. I never wanted to ruin their wedding. That moment was gone. But I needed people to stop treating me like some extra in a movie I helped fund. I'd been the rock for years. The bank, the ride, the cook, the babysitter. Then one day I wasn't even welcome at the gate. That kind of erasure doesn't just happen. It's trained, taught, absorbed. And Tyler had learned it was okay to push me aside, gently, politely, with a smile and a schedule. But here's what nobody tells you about being left out. It clears your vision. With every email I sent, I felt a little lighter. Not bitter. Just free. I was finally recognizing the line they'd drawn, and choosing not to cross it anymore. Next was the florist, a sweet woman in her mid-30s who ran a boutique called Briar and Bloom. I'd liked her from day one. Kind eyes, soft voice, knew her way around a peony. Her reply came quickly. Oh no, Ms. Whitmore. I had no idea you weren't actually present at the ceremony. I'm so sorry. Please take your time. I stared at that sentence. I had no idea you weren't present. Even the florist thought it was odd. That's how far out of bounds Tyler and Hannah had gone. And they were probably off honeymooning in Lake Tahoe, sipping champagne, posing for drone shots, smiling at the sunset, thinking they'd pulled it all off. But they hadn't. Because legacy isn't the photo album. It's in the names on the contracts. It's in the hands that built the stage for their vows. The roof they stood under was mine. That night I lit a candle and made dinner. Roast chicken, green beans. Simple. I ate alone. But I didn't feel small. I felt whole. Like the noise had finally been turned down and I could hear myself again. Clarity. That's what settled in. Clarity that I gave out of love, not duty. Clarity that I was generous, not foolish. Clarity that stepping back wasn't losing. It was honoring myself. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 simple lines. I am not a ghost. I was there. I mattered. And I still do. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need Tyler begging for forgiveness. I didn't need Hannah to admit anything. I just needed to reclaim my worth. Some people scream when they're disrespected. Others go quiet. Me. I send emails. The days after the wedding were silent. No text from Tyler. No card. No call. Nothing. And honestly, I didn't expect one. Not anymore. But what surprised me was how the silence didn't crush me. It didn't sting the way I thought it would. It actually felt like space. A new kind of freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone. I wasn't bending my days around someone else's needs. I started small. Cleaned out the pantry. Sorted the garage. Trimmed the rose bushes out front. The ones Henry had planted the spring before he passed. These were things I'd always meant to do but never found the time. I'd been too busy helping Tyler file taxes, watching his friends' kids, stocking their freezer when they were too stressed to cook. Now it felt strange, but good. Like I was learning how to live in my house again. One morning I drove into town and stopped by the old consignment bookstore I used to love. The owner, Marcy, looked up and smiled. Diane Whitmore? Haven't seen you in ages. You look well. I smiled right back. I'm getting there. I picked up a few mystery novels, then wandered next door to the cafe and ordered a cappuccino, something I hadn't done in years. I sat by the window, sipping slowly, reading the first chapter. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't feel guilty. Strange how, when you spend decades caring for others, you forget how to make a single decision just for yourself. No permission. No coordination. Just a choice. That night, I lit the fireplace for the first time since last winter. I curled up with one of my new books, a soft blanket and a bowl of stew I'd made just for me. Not because someone was hungry, because I wanted it. And somewhere between the pages, it hit me. They took me out of the wedding. But they couldn't take me out of my life. Because my life doesn't begin and end with Tyler. I love him, always will. He's my son. But I was a full person long before I became someone's mother. And that woman, she's still here. I was a little bruised, sure. Maybe a little older too. But I wasn't broken. I was still here. I started taking morning walks again. Short loops around the block at first, then longer ones through the park nearby. I began recognizing the regulars. The older woman with her golden retriever, the couple always in matching windbreakers, the young man who jogged with earbuds and gave a polite nod each time. I wasn't invisible. I was simply learning again how to be visible in the places that mattered. Later that week, I gathered every document related to the wedding, receipts, contracts, notes from the florist, and filed them all neatly into a folder I labeled closed. I slid it to the back of the filing cabinet. Not as ammunition. Not to reopen later. Just to mark that chapter as finished. That part of me, the one always waiting for someone else's approval, she was off duty now. A few days later, a certified envelope from the Belmont estate showed up, addressed to me, not to Tyler. Inside was an updated invoice stamped. Payment responsibility in dispute. Authorization withheld. Event pending review. I took a photo of it. Not to send. Not to show. Just to remember. Because that single document represented something no one could take unless I handed it over. My voice. That night, I received an email from a vendor I hadn't even contacted. A wedding photographer from Colorado. She must have found my name through the vendor chain. Hi, Ms. Whitmore. I just wanted to say I was heartbroken to hear how you were treated. I saw you from a distance that morning. You looked so poised even when things seemed tense. I never said anything, but I quietly took a few photos of you outside the gate. I'm attaching them here, no charge. You deserve to be part of the memory. I opened the attachment, and there I was. Standing outside the iron gates, gift in hand, back straight, face calm. Alone, but far from defeated. It was the only honest photo from that whole wedding. Maybe the only one that told the truth. I saved it. Not to frame. Not to share. Just to remind myself. I had been there. And that mattered. A week later, I got a voicemail from Tyler. His voice sounded tired, like someone who realized too late what he'd done but didn't know how to fix it. Hey Mom. I know things got kinda weird at the wedding. Hannah thinks maybe we should talk. I didn't know everything about the payments. Anyway, I hope we can sit down sometime. Just call me, okay? But I didn't call. Not because I was mad. I just didn't feel responsible anymore for mending what I didn't break. The message sat in my phone untouched. No reply. No rush. For the first time in a long time, I let them sit in the silence. That same day, I ran into Elaine, my neighbor down the street. Widowed like me, always fussing over her garden like it was a national competition. We stood chatting over the rosemary bushes. She looked me over and said, "You've been glowing lately. What's your secret?" I smiled. I stopped waiting for people to remember me. Turns out I remember myself just fine. She gave a little nod. The kind only women our age understand. We've all carried too much. And been thanked too little. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one from the estate manager at Belmont. Read. Following unresolved payment and contract stipulations, the wedding event for Tyler Whitmore and Hannah Mercer has been referred to legal counsel. Access to all photo and video materials is restricted until final resolution. I read it twice, then poured myself a glass of wine, stepped out to the porch and watched the wind stir the trees. So much money. So many months of planning. No. A wedding album they couldn't even access. A drone video no one could share. A frozen fairy tale. All because they forgot the one woman who made it possible. All because they thought I was replaceable. Now I know some folks listening might be wondering, why not just forgive them? Why not pick up the phone? And I hear you. I do. But let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own child's story? Like everything you did to raise them was just a forgotten prologue they skipped right past? If you have, then you know. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. It's about remembering your value when others forget it. I didn't ruin their day. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped paying for people who didn't see me. And if things fell apart, maybe it was because the cracks were already there. A few weeks passed. The air turned cooler. I boxed up Tyler's old baby clothes and donated them to the shelter. Packed away the last of the wedding files. Repainted the front door a warm terracotta shade I'd loved for years, but never chose because Hannah once said it wouldn't be neutral enough for resale. I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission now. Then one afternoon there was a knock at the door. It was Hannah. No makeup, no pearls, just jeans, a gray sweater, and eyes that looked different. Unsure. Softer. I wanted to talk, she said. I opened the door, but I didn't invite her in. That wasn't me being rude. That was me protecting the space I had just reclaimed. I didn't know Tyler told you not to come, she said. That was him. Not me. I looked her square in the eye. But you didn't stop it. She blinked. Swallowed. No. I didn't. We stood there in silence, not as mother-in-law and bride, not even as adversaries. Just two women separated by a choice by who gets to matter and who gets left outside. I'm sorry, she said quietly. And for the first time, I believed her. But I didn't hug her. I didn't say it's okay. Because it wasn't. I hope, I said gently, that someday you'll understand what it feels like to give someone everything, and be asked to wait outside the gate. She nodded. I think I already do. Then she left. No big speech. No closure. Just the truth finally spoken out loud. That night I printed the photo the photographer sent, the one of me standing alone. I placed it in a silver frame and set it on the mantel. Not as a scar. As a reminder. I was there. And I mattered. A few days later, while folding laundry, I heard the soft thunk of an envelope sliding through the mail slot. It was thick paper, formal, addressed not to Ms. Diane Whitmore, but to a state benefactor. Secondary disbursement inquiry. At first I didn't recognize the sender. A small legal firm in Denver. But then I saw the subject line. Asset Transfer Inquiry, Whitmore Family Trust. My heart stilled. I sat down on the couch, warm socks still in my lap, and read the letter 3 times. Tyler had reached out to the legal firm that handled Henry's old trust. Without telling me, he had asked to review all remaining property and holdings. My house, the remaining bonds, even the old cabin in Echo Pines. Everything still in my name. He had no right. But he had tried. No phone call. No conversation. Just a quiet little test. Pushing the door, seeing if it might swing open. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the wedding. It never was. That was just the moment it all spilled over. Tyler had been preparing a new version of our story for a while. One where I was just a benefactor. Not a mother. Just a name on legal documents. Not an invitation. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice. That I was too gentle. Too quiet. Too old. But I did notice. And I wasn't going to be erased. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Grace. Sharp as a tack, steady as a mountain. I need to lock everything down, I said. She didn't even hesitate. We'll put protections in place this week. If anyone tries anything, we'll catch it. I exhaled. A deep, bone-level relief. Like someone had finally handed me a fire extinguisher in a room that had been quietly smoldering for years. They thought I'd forget. That I wouldn't read the fine print. That I'd fade away like so many mothers do, quiet, generous, unseen. But I remembered everything. I remembered Tyler crying at the bank when his partner emptied their account. I remembered co-signing for his first truck. I remembered paying 3 months' rent when he and Hannah were broke in Los Angeles chasing influencer dreams. And I never asked for a dime back. Not once. All I ever wanted was a seat at the table. A place in their lives. What I got was a text the night before the wedding. It's a really tight guest list, Mom. Hope you understand. And now, a silent attempt to slip through the last doors I hadn't already paid for. That night I opened the fireproof box in my closet. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were the real documents. Henry's original will, our old marriage license, the deed to the cabin in Echo Pines, the birth certificate where Tyler's name sat typed right next to mine. I pulled them all from the fireproof box. No one could take those from me. And more importantly, no one could make me forget who I was before they started trying to rewrite my story. I looked around the house, really looked, and saw how many things I had kept for them. The guest room I always kept clean and ready. The pantry still stocked with Tyler's favorite childhood snacks. Boxes in the basement labeled Tyler, high school, or Hannah, baby plans, just in case. Then quietly I began to clean. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just intention. The baby boxes? Donated. The snacks? Tossed. The guest room? Transformed into an art studio finally. I dragged out my old easel from the garage, dusted it off, bought fresh oils and painted, not with perfection but with breath. With life. Like I was exhaling everything that had been stuck inside for years. There's something healing about creating something that isn't waiting for applause. I painted my lavender bushes. The warm golden light through the kitchen window. The mountains I used to hike before Tyler was even born. And each brushstroke felt like a quiet sentence. I'm still here. I'm still whole. You cannot erase what you didn't create. I never told anyone about the letter. The one from the lawyer. I didn't need to. Because this was never just about property. It was about dignity. And I wasn't giving that away. Not for a wedding. Not for a child's approval. And definitely not for a signature on a line. 2 more weeks passed. Leaves started falling onto the driveway like soft little reminders that time won't wait. Not for regret, not for apology. Then came a knock on the door. I expected a neighbor. Maybe the mailman needing a signature. But standing there was a man in a navy blazer, holding a clipboard and a manila envelope. Mrs. Whitmore? He asked, politely but cold. I'm here on behalf of the Mercer Whitmore Legal Inquiry. This is just a courtesy delivery. You've been named in a preliminary guardianship review. For a second I couldn't speak. I took the envelope with steady hands, though inside something cold sliced through me like a thread of ice. He turned and left. No explanation, no emotion. Just that dry, professional indifference that somehow made it worse. Inside the envelope was a formal request for conservatorship evaluation. Filed by Tyler and Hannah. They were asking the court to review my mental and financial competence, citing inconsistent behavior, possible memory lapses and irregular financial activity. I sat on the edge of the couch, the envelope still in my lap. My own son thinks I'm too old to manage my life, I whispered. But there were no tears this time. Just clarity. Clean. Undeniable. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to silence me. I called Grace. I didn't even get halfway through before she said, "This is retaliation, Diane. Pure intimidation. We'll file a counter-motion immediately. Do you think I'll have to appear in court?" I asked. "You might," she said. "But I'll be right there with you." That night I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a blazer with paperwork in hand, signed by the same people you once rocked to sleep. I pulled out my old leather planner, the one I used when Tyler was in school. Every field trip, every dental appointment, every early dismissal had its own color-coded tab. There was nothing in his childhood I hadn't managed. And now he was telling the world I couldn't manage my own life? I wasn't going to let them gaslight me into surrendering what I had built, what I had guarded dollar by dollar. The next morning Grace and I met at the cafe. She explained the process. The burden of proof would fall on them. They'd have to prove I was unstable. They'd try to use the frozen payments, the wedding vendor emails, everything, to make it seem like I wasn't capable. But we had records, receipts, contracts, communications. Everything I did was legal. Thoughtful. Well within my rights. I nodded. Then let them try. We filed the formal response that same afternoon. 2 weeks later I got a notice. Tyler and Hannah had withdrawn their petition. Turns out Grace's letter did the job. It laid out my full financial history. Clean. Precise. Unshakable. It even included a statement from the florist saying she had no idea I hadn't been at the ceremony. That alone probably did it. They didn't want a judge to see the truth. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't unstable. I was inconvenient. I was a mother who'd stopped saying yes. A widow who dared to protect what she and her husband had built. I never heard from Tyler after that. Not a word. No apology. Nothing. Hannah unfollowed me on social media. I saw it, smiled and shook my head. Because now I understood something they never would. You can remove someone from a photo grid. But you can't erase them from the deeds they still hold. That night I stood by the window, the breeze cool through the crack in the glass, and whispered, "You tried to bury me in paperwork. But I'm the one who taught you how to sign your name." It was the scent that brought it all back. Lavender. Faint, familiar. Like my mother's hands when she tucked me in. Like the sachets I used to hide in Tyler's drawers as a baby. I hadn't planted lavender since Henry died. But that fall I ordered seeds and tilled a small plot in the backyard with my own hands. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't for them. It was for me. And that's when something new began. Not loud. Not dramatic. But real. I had spent years being the background hum. The one who remembered the birthdays, made the soup, paid the bills. No one ever asked if the hum got tired. They just expected it to keep going. Now I was building something that didn't depend on being needed. One afternoon, Grace and I sat at the kitchen table going over the final estate paperwork. "We're done," she said, sliding the documents toward me. "The house, the cabin, the retirement fund, all locked in. No one can touch a thing without your approval." I nodded. "Good. I want to make one more change." Grace lifted an eyebrow. "To the will?" "Yes," I said. "A new one. From scratch." She listened without a word as I dictated clause after clause. I had thought long and hard about what message I wanted to leave. Not just with words, but with action. Tyler was still listed in the old version. Out of habit. But habit isn't the same as love. He hadn't just forgotten me. He tried to erase me. "I want to create a scholarship," I said. "For women over 50 going back to school. Name it the Lavender Fund." Grace smiled. "That's beautiful." "I also want the cabin to go to Elaine," I said. "She's helped me more over the fence than Tyler has in 5 years." Grace made notes. "And the house." I thought for a moment. "I'll live in it as long as I please. After that, I want it sold. The proceeds should go half to the Lavender Fund, and half to the community library." "Are you sure?" Grace asked gently. I took a breath. "I'm not angry. But I'm not invisible. And I won't pretend I wasn't pushed aside." That night I brewed a pot of chamomile tea and stepped out to the porch. The lavender was just starting to sprout. Tiny, pale green shoots. Reaching. And I smiled to myself. Sometimes the smallest roots grow the strongest. Now I know some of you might be wondering, isn't that harsh? Leaving your son out of your will? Let me ask you something. Have you ever given someone the best years of your life only to be treated like a footnote? If you have, then you know. This isn't revenge. This is authorship. My story was never meant to end in bitterness. But I'll be damned if it ends in silence. The next morning I placed the new signed will into the fireproof box, right next to the old one. A reminder. People change. And so can intentions. I kept just one photo framed beside my bed, the one of me standing at the gate alone. But never erased. On the shelf in my bedroom, there's a photo of me standing in front of the wedding gates, holding a gift no one ever accepted. Just below it, tucked away in a drawer, I keep a printed copy of the Lavender Fund Charter. Because someday, long after I'm gone, some woman will open a letter telling her she's received help from a stranger who believed in second chapters. And maybe, just maybe, she'll grow lavender of her own. That year the first snow came early. It dusted the tiny lavender sprouts in my backyard like powdered sugar. Soft, fleeting, a quiet reminder that everything, joy and grief alike, moves in seasons. I watched from the kitchen window, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of cinnamon tea. The house was quiet, not lonely, just still, like it had finally taken a long breath after years of holding it in. It had been 3 months since I rewrote my will. 2 since Tyler withdrew the guardianship petition. And 1 month since Hannah's name last showed up in my inbox asking for some tax document she assumed I still had. I didn't reply. I let silence say what needed saying. I spent my days differently now. I read again. I walked each afternoon. I joined a writing group at the library, just 5 women over 60, notebooks in hand, telling stories no one had asked to hear until now. There's a strange kind of freedom in becoming who you really are, when no one's watching anymore. One afternoon, Judith, one of the women in our circle, read a line from her memoir that stayed with me for days. Some mothers raise men. Some raise takers. It wasn't bitter. Just honest. And I realized I'd stopped asking why. Why Tyler changed. Why he let someone else draw the line between us. Why my love had become inconvenient. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I was building something better. That week I ran into Donna, the florist from the wedding at the farmer's market. She touched my arm gently. "Oh, Ms. Whitmore. You were such a joy to work with. I was confused when you weren't at the wedding." No one ever explained. I just smiled. They didn't need to. She hesitated, then added, the vendors still talk about you, you know. No one's ever pulled out that fast, that clean. It was legendary. I chuckled. Let's just call it responsible accounting. But as I walked away with bags of apples swinging at my sides, I felt something settle inside me. Not pride. Not regret. Just certainty. They may have erased me from their big day, but they couldn't erase the truth. Everyone remembered who paid the deposits, who signed the contracts, whose name was on the lines that actually mattered. When the last sparkler burned out, when the cake was freezer burned and forgotten, I was still standing. Still whole. I didn't need Tyler to apologize. I didn't need Hannah to understand. I just needed to stop bending. Because here's what no one tells you. When you spend decades giving, the ones who benefit most often don't even notice you're gone. Until the dishes pile up and the lights start flickering. Let them flicker. I kept the wedding program they mailed me in a box in the hallway closet. Not for nostalgia. Just as a reminder of what it feels like to be intentionally forgotten. Next to the photo of me at the wedding gates, I placed another. Clara, the first Lavender Fund recipient. At 58, after raising 3 grandchildren, she went back to nursing school. In her letter she wrote, I never thought I'd matter again. This scholarship told me I do. I cried when I read it. Quiet, grateful tears. Not for praise, but because someone saw what I gave. On quiet nights I still talk to Henry sometimes, like he's beside me by the fireplace. You were right, I told him once. We gave too much, asked for too little. Then I smiled. But now, I'm asking for peace, space, joy. On my own terms. That night the snow returned. Soft, heavy flakes falling like forgiveness. They took my seat at the table. So I built my own home and chose every chair myself. A letter came. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Tyler's. I let it sit for a day. Not because I was scared, I was tired. The next morning, with my tea and frost on the windows, I opened it. I pushed you out. I thought I was protecting Hannah. Myself. But really, I treated you like a problem. I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm sorry. I folded it gently and placed it in a drawer. Not in the trash. Not on display. Just where it belonged. He didn't ask for anything. But I could feel it. He still hoped I'd let him back in. But I couldn't. The trust, the years, they weren't his to reclaim. What I rebuilt was no longer his to inherit. Later, I visited the community center. The Lavender Fund had supported its 5th woman. They stood there, gray-haired, strong, eyes full of purpose. One learning accounting, another studying elder law. Mara, a former waitress, hugged me tight. Thank you, she said. You don't know what this means. But I did. Because I was them, the ones who kept everything running while others took credit. And now what I gave was finally in the right hands. That night I made a list. Everything I gave Tyler and never got back. The down payment. The tuition. The wedding. The forgotten birthdays. The unopened gift. Not to guilt him, to remind myself. Generosity should go both ways. His never did. I burned the list. Watched it fade. Then I opened the drawer with Tyler's letter. I didn't burn it. Didn't forgive it. I folded it tighter, tucked it under Clara's photo and whispered. This will never be yours. Not because I'm cruel, but because I finally learned to keep what matters. It ended without a fight. Just silence, space, and time. No more calls. No cards. No messages. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I let go, not out of anger but out of truth. Begging for love isn't love. I used to replay it all. Wonder when he stopped calling me mom with warmth. Now I don't wonder. I gave him everything. And he left anyway. Healing didn't come from legal filings or payments. It came from morning sun, lavender in the breeze, and knowing I still have something beautiful to give. Just not to him. That spring I opened the cabin in Echo Pines. Alone. I swept, stocked the pantry and stayed. No Wi-Fi. No plans. Just quiet. One morning by the lake I whispered. You gave Diane. You gave more than enough. And I meant it. Back home I hung a sign by the door. No one who makes you beg for love deserves your presence. Not bitter. Just a boundary. Now I spend time with people who see me. Elaine, who brings lemon scones. Judith, who helped me publish my first essay. Mara, who now mentors other women. They know me as Diane. Not as Tyler's mother. And that's what I needed, to be seen for who I am. Do I miss him? Yes. But not the man who forgot me. I miss the boy with sticky orange juice fingers and sleepy I love yous. That version is gone. And I've stopped searching for him. Instead, I carry that love forward, into letters, lavender, and strangers who feel like sisters. They may never know my story, but they carry a piece of my heart. And that is enough. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is rising anyway.